Welcome to Seed Saving Basics, the first of two seed-related gardening workshops hosted by Providence Community Library. I'm Lee Smith, the Adult Services Librarian at Mount Pleasant. I'm joined by Amy Fontaine, who's already making a splash as the new library manager at Rochambeau. We're both really excited to partner with the URI Master Gardeners and the Providence Seed Library to bring you these workshops. I have two quick housekeeping items. We have closed captioning enabled. So if you'd like to show or hide closed captioning, click live transcript on the bottom toolbar. You're also encouraged to ask questions, lots of questions, at any time during the presentation by writing them in the chat. So we'll have a Q&A session a little later, and Amy will read them in the order that we got them. So our first presenter is Fatema Maswood, who is an ecological designer, educator, and artist. They collaborated with the Providence Community Library to start the Providence Seed Library as a part of an art residency with the City of Providence Office of Sustainability, and continue to collect seeds and seed stories in the community. So Fatema, you have the floor.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Lee. I'm just going to share a really brief introduction to the Providence Seed Library. So I'll just take a few minutes of your time, and then you're welcome to enjoy all of Bill's expertise. So I'm going to share the screen right now, and hopefully it works. All right. Can everyone see that? Cool. So the Providence Seed Library is, as Lee mentioned, a project that I have been able to work on since just about the end of 2020 in partnership with the Providence Community Library system. So this project, I was able to dedicate time to it through the support of an art residency between the Office of Arts, Culture, Tourism and the Office of Sustainability. And the Seed Library is a community resource for free, open-pollinated, heirloom, and culturally relevant seeds. So what that means is that all the seeds that are currently in the Seed Library are varieties that can be saved from one season to the next. Many of them are bred for particular traits and have a particular narrative attached to them. So seeds that have been passed down in a community or in a family. And there's seeds that also speak to the different stories of communities that live in the Providence area. So you can, as a user of the library, you can take seeds out of the library, but you can also return seeds or donate seeds into the library system. And further information can be found at the website, which is provseedlib.com, or on the Instagram, which is at provseedlib. And the images here of some of the seed packets that are in the library. So I'm going to give you a quick tutorial of how to navigate to the online world of the Seed Library. So this is the splash page of the website. And if you were to click on that yellow link below, you would come to what you're seeing on the left side of the page here. So with a lot of support and energy from librarians, almost all of the seed varieties that are in circulation are fully searchable in the Ocean State Library's online catalog. So what that means is you can click on that link, or you can search Providence Seed Library in the search bar, and that would bring you to this set of categories, and you can then click on one of the categories. So to the right is beans, and then you can see which seeds are available, and you can even reserve them or have them sent to the library that you use, which I think is really cool. And I'm really excited that's the feature of the Seed Library. This here is just an example of what the envelopes look like. So
excuse me, Fatema, I'm so sorry. Your screen is not progressing.
Okay.
It's still on the original. I think because you're not maybe in present mode.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize.
That's okay.
Let me, sorry, it's been moving for me and I didn't realize. So let me,
there we go.
What if is this okay? Folks, unfortunately, you'll have the boundary on the page, but I hope people don't mind. So let me go back really quickly. So this is the first image I referenced, which is pictures of seeds packaged in the seed library. This is the next image I referenced, which is the splash page of the website. And this is images of the seed library catalog. So that's the subcategories on the left that you can click on if you're looking for, you know, a leafy green or a variety of okra. And then to the right, you can see that individual varieties are all available. So this page is, these are what the envelopes look like. So to the left is the information that you would find on the seed envelopes that are presently available in library branches. So they each have a common name, a botanical name, the source that those seeds come from. So that might be an individual grower or a seed company, and what I've termed seed saving difficulty, which I'll get into later. And the image on the right is something I just made that I'm kind of excited about. I got rubber stamps to make these seed return envelopes, and the envelopes with information to return or donate seeds to the library include the common name or name you use to refer to that plant, its scientific or Latin name, the seed grower, the location it's grown in, the year it's collected in, and whether it's an annual, meaning you have to replant every year, or a perennial, meaning it'll grow back from roots each year, and any notes that you might want to add. So I'm gonna quickly review some seed borrowing guidelines, and these are in progress, which is to say that if people have thoughts or ideas on how to improve this system, I'm really open to them and happy to hear them. But currently the guidelines are, please take only as many seeds as you need and try not to take all available seeds of a single variety. If you borrow seeds, try to return seeds to the library in the following year if that's possible for you. When you take seeds out of the library, consider your cultural relationship to the plants you will grow. And with that, I mean, if you don't have a cultural relationship with the plant and maybe it's the last set of seeds available, or just really deeply consider who you are and how you relate to that growing thing and how you will continue to relate to that plant, and do so with intention. Then I mentioned seed saving difficulty. So that's something I've labeled in the first year of the seed library. I've labeled the packets with kind of an approximation of seed saving difficulty and all that. So easy, medium, or difficult. And that just means that if it's medium or difficult, there might be some tricks to how you're saving the seeds. So you might have to keep in mind isolation distance so that a seed doesn't cross-pollinate, or you might have to ferment that seed in order to save it well for the following year. So please don't let that discourage you, but also let that be a guide to you if you're hoping to start saving seeds. If it's your first year doing it, maybe start with an easier variety, but if you're very experienced, you can take on something that's more complicated. And the fifth guideline is to let our collective knowledge grow through this experience. So these are seed return guidelines, and this is a pilot year. So we'll see how this process goes, and I'm sure we'll find ways to streamline it and make it easier for everyone who is handling seed returns. But currently our request is that if you hope to donate seed to the library, please store it in a sealed paper envelope or a glass container, glass jar, and bring it to one of the participating Providence Community Library branches and label those seeds with this information. So start with the common name. And if you have a name that you refer to the seed in your own language, it's really cool and important to have that. So I would love for people to do that. The scientific name, if you know it. You can optionally include your own information as a seed grower, indicate where you got that plant. If you're interested in maybe staying in touch with whoever takes those seeds in the future, but again, that's optional. Then the growing location, the year that you harvested the seeds, and you can include how many plants and whether it's an annual or perennial. And all that information just means that whoever's growing plants from those seeds in the next year is better informed in whatever they're doing. And then I have some requests for seeds not to donate. So please don't donate hybrid seeds. So if you purchase seeds from the store, those are often labeled hybrid or F1 on the seed package. And a lot of really popular annual vegetable crops are often hybrids. So be mindful of that. Please don't return seeds that are saved from hybrid plants unless you're like super pro and you like dehybridize the seed variety. And but in general, don't do that because we don't know what traits those plants will grow with. The odds of this are a little slim, but please don't donate patented or genetically modified seed, which is not something you're typically coming across, but I figured it was worth a mention. And please try not to donate seed that hasn't been dried properly or seed that is moldy. And the participating library branches that you can return seeds to are Knight Memorial, Mount Pleasant, Washington Park, and Rochambeau at this time. So that's all I have for now. Thank you so much for your time. Stay posted because in the coming months, after we have this fall gardening series in October, throughout the late winter and early spring, we have a series of classes called Seedlings that I'm very excited about, that focuses on both the practical dimensions of gardening and growing from seed and also the social and political aspects of seed sovereignty and food sovereignty as they connect to land justice. And if you have questions for me, I think we have a few minutes. You can email me directly by emailing hello@provseedlib.com. And you're also welcome to reach out to me on Instagram. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Okay, does anybody have any specific, I know we've got some questions in the chat that we're addressing in the chat, but I will just ask this. Can they mail the seeds back to participating Providence libraries?
I don't know how the library system handles mail.
Yeah, I don't know if they would get ruined in the mail or they could get squished. I don't know.
I think
We'll get back to people on that. And we will make the guidelines available through the libraries, probably with a printout, and we can send it out. We can send out your PDF of your presentation, Fatema, to everybody that attended.
So I'm skimming the chat right now, and I see that a couple people have asked about how seeds are being checked for any of the qualifications mentioned. And at this point, they're not. I think it's sometimes the nature of a community stewarded seed library or seed bank system that hopefully you're getting what the seed is labeled with, but there's always the chance that something might have cross-pollinated or it's not exactly what it's labeled as, but it's, it's also kind of part of the magic, I think.
And envelopes will be available at the library branches for the seed saving, right?
Yes,
okay.
I still need to get some envelopes to different library branches. So that's on me, but they will be available.
Yep. And I see someone else is asking, do we want vegetables or flower seeds?
Definitely all of the above.
Okay. Not sure, do you see any other?
So I see some kind of practical questions. How do you dry seeds? So I often just put them in I think Bill might get into that, but I put them in a paper bag and put them in a cool, dark place. Or kind of spread them out on a piece of cloth or a screen. For envelopes, you can use any old paper envelope. For the library, I've been using glassine envelopes because they'll be stored there for a longer period of time, and glassine is like an archival material, so it helps control the moisture level and pH level, because in a, you know, if it's a seed bank, ideally you want to really control the humidity and temperature, and the libraries are actually pretty temperature controlled because they're, you know, they're like air conditioned and well insulated structures, I think. So it's not that the seeds are in really bad conditions, but they're not in the most ideal conditions. So I've been using like a slightly more expensive material for this first year, but using whatever is available is totally fine. And yeah, if people have more specific questions, like where the envelopes are purchased from, I think it might be easier to just shoot me an email, and I'm happy to send people links to that.
All right. Thank you so much, Fatema. So now we bring on our guest speaker for the evening. So thank you all for joining us. Bill Baddeley is a URI Master Gardener. He took the Master Composter course first in 2013, and then the Master Gardener course in 2014. And he did so primarily to answer questions put to him by neighbors and people strolling by his garden as he was out there working, which is where it always begins. And he gives talks for the URI Master Gardeners on various subjects related to vegetable gardening. And we have been told he is the seed saving king. So I'm going to pass it off to Bill. That's what all the questions about. How would we do this so that we can return some seeds to the Providence Community Library's, the Seed Library? So take it away, Bill.
Right. Well, thank you, Fatema. That was very informative. You're doing great work. I hope this really takes hold and goes places. I'm going to share the screen here. And you'll have to let me know whether this is appearing properly for you. If it's not, yeah, I'll try to rectify it. We'll start at the beginning and bring your shared window to the front. Well, don't know. I'm going to try that again. Good. Well, so I got started with seed saving quite some time back when I discovered the Seed Savers organization that was sort of a grassroots effort that took off and became pretty large scale. There were a lot of participants in the network of seed savers. At one point, when they were still printing catalogs, it was the size of a phone directory with lots and lots of people from all over the country contributing seeds and exchanging them. So let me tell you about the cooperative extension. The whole purpose of the cooperative extension is to establish a partnership between land-grant universities in all 50 states and the Department of Agriculture initially, and that's broadened out. And it's gone from essentially a resource for farmers to quite a lot of different programs that have a broader reach, but still oriented to citizens. The Master Gardener program is essentially a group of volunteers who are trained to give reliable answers to gardening questions and to basically donate or convey to people reliable information that's based on research and science. We've got a gardening and environmental hotline. And this may be the best thing we do in terms of day-to-day gardening. If you ever have a problem or a question, something just doesn't look right, you're puzzled, you can get in touch with the gardening and environmental hotline, and you'll get an answer to your question. People will be happy to work with you. You can send pictures, and this is free, open to the public. Just go ahead and give them a call when it's operating, or send email in the times, like out of the growing season or on days when it's closed. Do soil testing. We have demonstration gardens around the state. There are all sorts of things going on, but the whole mission is to get information on gardening out to people. So this talk is really intended to give you enough to get started and oriented to seed saving. And there's a page of resources, but you can find a lot of information on seed saving from cooperative extension programs around the states, and from publications. Talk to your local librarian. They probably have some material that would be helpful. So we're going to go through just some examples, some of the principles and examples of what it's like to shift from growing seeds and growing plants to saving seeds. And seeds, John Withy, I believe is his name, who collected literally hundreds of bean varieties and offered those to people. And this is a couple of his cases of bean varieties. The basic bean is Phaseolus vulgaris, but the varieties are incredibly numerous and come from all over the place. His collection is primarily from the Americas, but yeah. So the gardening cycle is essentially you select seeds, you plan your garden, you prepare the soil, you plant seeds or transplants into the garden, you tend the plants, spend your summer, later parts of the summer weeding, and then at the end of the cycle you harvest the fruits of the growing season and do with them whatever you had in mind. So if you already are doing that, which probably most of you are, then shifting to seed saving really just involves a little more preparation, slightly different things, and some new exercises that you might not be familiar with. So the first thing is to select seeds from open-pollinated varieties, just as Fatema was saying. You can find these at seed banks, seed growers, seed sellers. These are two examples from the Johnny's catalog, but lots and lots of providers now are offering more open-pollinated, true breeding seeds. And the problem with the F1s is, if you remember your sort of grade school introduction to genetics and the flowers, what happens in subsequent generations is sort of variable. Where with what we're going to talk about is how to take a specific variety that may have very strong meaning for you or it may just be something you like so much you just want to have it around. And using the techniques of seed saving, you can keep that particular variety exactly true on every growing cycle. And that's worth quite a lot. And that's the main focus of seed saving for vegetables. So the first one in this, you'll see there's an F1. If you see an F1 or any other F, but that indicates it's a hybrid. It might be a fine variety to grow, but it's not going to be a reliable seed to save. Where the Waltham butternut down below is an open pollinated variety. So if you are working carefully with that, it will breed true. And you can take, really, if you finish growing a butternut squash that you've prepared and grown true, grow two, one for you and anybody that you would like to shower with seeds, and the other one, take it to the seed library. It's a huge number of seeds in a butternut squash and lots of other fruits as well. So the second part of this is to plan your garden for seed saving. Plants have different ways of pollinating, or that is to say, setting fruit. And the basic methods are self-pollinating, which is essentially the flower is self-fertile. And if tomato flower, for instance, is shaken a bit day to day, it's more likely to set its fruit within its own flowers. There are lots of varieties of plants that essentially, before the flower opens, the pollen is dropped from the anthers and hits the flower. It fertilizes the flower internally before the flower opens in the morning. So you've got self-pollinating, insect pollinating, and wind pollinating, or combinations of those. But those are the basic methods. And there are isolation distances that you'll find in charts. Bean plants are self-pollinating, and the typical recommendation for any variety of beans is to separate one variety from another by 10 to 20 feet, which isn't so bad. And you can often accommodate a few bean varieties on that basis in a garden. Squashes, on the other hand, are insect pollinated, and they require up to half a mile of separation, which is difficult to achieve in a home garden for most of us. So there are ways around that, and part of what you need to plan for is distancing, but also you need to think about how you're going to handle the problem of pollination. And for squashes, hand pollination is the classic method, and we'll kind of illustrate that in a little bit here. So the next two steps in the cycle, planting and tending the garden, are a little different, because when you're saving seeds, you want to remove plants that just aren't quite right, that are misshapen, not thriving, diseased, and you don't want to continue with those. What you're looking for typically is a strong plant and strong seed formation. And we're trying to do pollinations that are within that variety of plant. And once you get started, you will want to notice, for instance, a bean that develops early in the season. And if that's happening, you probably want to think about putting a ribbon around the stem of that, very loosely, a string or a ribbon, something that's going to identify it later, because one bean on a plant is quickly lost without some kind of identification. And that's also important for squashes and other sorts of plants. So finally, so harvest is much the same, except that you really want to wait for full maturity. And once the fruit is fully mature, you need to remove, separate out, and clean the seeds and prepare them and dry them for longer term storage. And because there is a handout with all these slides on it, you don't need to worry too much about this. But mostly what you're going to find is that when you have a question about a specific plant, it's a really good idea to just go and find documentation on what you ought to think about doing with that for pollinating and saving. And those resources, at least some of them, are on a page later in this slide set. All right, so we've got 3 examples of vegetables: beans, tomatoes, and winter squash. And each of these has an interesting trait of one sort and another. So beans, they're annuals, they're self or insect pollinated. Right, beans are a perfect example of self-pollinators that, if given a half a chance, will self-pollinate before the insects have access to the flower. So they can be self-pollinated by wind once the flower is open, by shaking. If you're out in the morning early, you can go around and shake the bean plants, and the same is true with other self-pollinators. So, beans. You need to wait for the beans to dry on the plant. So, here in this picture, the one on the right is closest to really dry, but we're really looking for crispy dry. And if you have, as I had one year, a stand of beans that are kind of on the edge of the garden where people walk by, it's helpful to put up a sign saying, oh, by the way, we're trying to grow these for seed, and we're not neglecting them. So just leave them, let them fully develop and dry, would you? And people will follow that sign, in my experience. So you do have to let them dry and become really quite crisp before you open them up. And then threshing them, put them in a bag and walk on it is a reasonable way of going. You can also hand shell them if it's a small number. And the test, once you've put them in a not brightly lit, not heated, that is to say, not over stoves or in dryers or anything like that, just out in open air, you can test to see if those beans are actually dry by hitting them with a hammer against a hard surface. And if they shatter, then they're dry. If they just mash, then they're not yet. And when you're done with the drying and they're ready to go, you can put them in a closed container. Glass containers are good. Other sorts of containers, envelopes, specialized envelopes are a good bet also. You can put them in a refrigerator or a freezer to preserve them even longer. So, tomatoes. Tomatoes are an example of the fermentation that Fatema was talking about. These are annuals. They pollinate either by themselves or insects, and they have a slightly greater separation requirement or recommendation than other things. But most of the plants that you're going to find are pretty well adapted for self-pollination, and your chances of being able to keep that strain pure or a direct descendant of its parent plant are pretty good, because tomato plants do tend to self-fertilize, self-pollinate. Once you have them ready, the way that tomatoes move themselves from one generation to the next is to settle into the ground and rot and provide the seeds with a starting point in the spring. And I had one variety called red fig, which are kind of sweet, and for a long time in the 20s and 30s in particular, they were regarded as a substitute for figs that, you know, are hard to grow in a lot of parts of the United States. And they came back for years, just, you know, grew a little patch here and there, and they would self-seed the next year. Tomatoes do that a lot anyway. But in order for us to reproduce those conditions, you have to essentially squeeze out the seeds or put them in a blender. But basically, you put them in a jar or some other container and wait for mold to completely cover the surface of that container. And then once that's done, and once that mold surface is complete, you can pour off the mold and debris and essentially work the pulp off the seeds with rubbing them against a strainer. Rinse them and then dry them on hard surface. Coffee filters are highly recommended, and stir them up. And when they're dry, put them in a sealed container. Now here's the squash, which is squashes have male and female flowers, and they're primarily pollinated by insects. And the bees in my neighborhood travel at least 2 miles. Most pollinators have long ranges. And so you could actually have within the genus, I believe is the level of distinction, separation, squashes within that family will cross-pollinate. And so you might end up with funny results. But since it's really difficult to maintain a half-mile separation, you use a hand pollination method. So you start by looking for flowers on the vine that are almost going to open up. And when you found them, the male flower at the top doesn't have any particular, it's just a simple flower, where the female flowers have a bulb below the flower that is the part of the organ that develops into the fruit. So you tape the male flowers and then gently tie the female flowers before they've had a chance to open. And then when they are ready to open, you take the male flowers and just remove all the petals from those flowers and detach them from the stalk. And then one at a time, you remove the ties and open it very gently, because these flowers are delicate and their stems are delicate. And then while you're making sure that no bees get in your way, you pick up the exposed male flower and pollinate the female flower. So you basically cover the stigma surfaces with pollen and then very gently close the petals and seal it with a piece of tape and put a marker on the stem of that particular flower so that you'll be able to tell that this is the one you hand pollinated, or one of the ones that you hand pollinated. And then you wait for the fruit to mature, harvest it, and then give it another 3 weeks for the seeds to fully develop. And at that point, you open the squash, scoop out the seeds, scrub off the all of the strings and wet material around them, and lay them out on a hard surface and let them dry. And with the squash seeds, you can try to bend them. If they bend, they're not there yet. If they break, they're ready. And that is basically what we're looking for. We want dry seeds that have dried in open air or in a sealed container that has air in it, but not heated in an oven or anything like that, and given a chance to fully dry. And once they're fully dry, then keep them cool, and you're away. So here are some resources. The University of Maine has an excellent publication. The University of Michigan is also good. And then there are books, just this one is the only one I'm pointing to, but there are others, and there are increasingly large numbers of sources of really good information. Almost always the university extensions will have oversight from experts in the field who make sure that what they say is reliable and true. And then the Seed Savers organization has quite a lot of useful information, charts, procedures, that sort of thing. And that's pretty much the sip from the fire hose on seed saving. I hope that that was useful, and I would be very happy to answer questions as long as we have a shot at that.
Okay, so I'm going to read the questions that have been coming into the chat for you. The first one was the Seed Saver organization that you had talked about at the beginning of your presentation that you had started with. Is it still in service? And can you repeat the name of it?
It's the seedsavers.org. If I page back one,
oh, there it is. Yep.
Near the bottom there, and the right. Okay.
Okay.
And they've got envelopes and all kinds of supplies as well. Again, you can find these things elsewhere.
Great. Can you tell us what open-pollinated means?
Yeah, it means that it's not a cross that is two different plants that are combined to produce characteristics that no open pollinated plant, which is one that is just pollinated and reproducing through natural processes of pollination. These are sort of more specialized plants where plants are combined for their characteristics and then sold one-offs.
Okay. Do any seeds need to be frozen prior to storage?
Not prior to storage that I know of.
Okay.
They're safe to store in a freezer after. And there may be some that there are certainly seeds of pine trees that don't grow without burning.
Okay.
So there may be
okay. If a plant has mildew, should its seeds be saved?
Depends on the extent of the mildew. I would be especially cautious if the fruits are mildewed, or if there's any sign of mildew inside the fruit. That's a problem.
How do you get sweet potato slips from your potatoes?
Oh, well, that I would put that out as a question with, on the internet, asking for an extension reference, but the idea is basically to put the potato in sand or some warm, moist place where it can start to grow the eyes, and then you detach the eyes once they're sprouted from the potato and start them. But it's more complicated than that. A little bit.
Can an heirloom's fruit become hybrid if wind or insect pollinated?
Yeah, you can get something different. If you get Hubbard squash and a butternut, I believe, for an example, cross-pollinating, you'll get the fruit that you thought would come from the plant in the first year, but if you plant those seeds the next year, they could be different. Yeah.
Okay. Do flower seeds have different processes for saving than vegetables?
They all have, I'm less familiar with flowers, let me declare that openly, but I would look for the specifics. It's like marigold seeds, just sort of, you can pull them out of the seed head, and different plants have different characteristics. I would look up the variety that you're interested in.
Okay. There are several questions about saving perennial plants, herbs and flowers, and milkweed. So they could always call the hotline, right?
Yeah,
to get information about that. Okay, great. Which is right up on the screen.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, I save tomato seeds on paper towels and then put them in glass jars. Why does mold have to grow on the seeds?
It has to grow over the seeds in order to essentially do the same kind of preconditioning of the seeds that they go through if they're in the middle of a decomposing tomato.
Okay. And then we have a question, can a food dehydrator be used to save seeds, or would the temperature be too high?
It's too high.
Too high. Okay. Okay. That is the end of the questions in the chat. We still have some. How about favorite resources to learn about how to grow and save seeds?
Well,
is that basically your the resource list that you gave us?
Yeah, I have a longer list for general information on there are books on seed starting. There are books on general cultivation of particular plants. So the free publication from the University of Kentucky on surprisingly similar climate to our own, and a very well-written guide to gardening is available free from the University of Kentucky. It's the Home Gardening in Kentucky manual. But there are other things. There are lots of really well-done books that you should kind of take a trawl through your library and see what
exactly. Free at your local library.
One of my favorites is by Frank Tozer, who's, if you can find his book on organic vegetable gardening, it's well worth a look.
Okay. What is the ideal temperature to save seeds? I'm sorry, dry seeds.
Dry seeds, room temperature. The sort of environmental temperature in the late part of the season, nothing hotter than 100 degrees, I would say. Generally, you want to put them in a relatively shaded, cooler space, and then give them time.
Okay. Any recommendations for YouTube channels for those of us that are visual learners?
Yeah, pretty much everybody now. The Seed Savers organization uses video. The university extension programs increasingly are using video. So there are lots of good spots there. Same is
Okay.
true for composting and any other gardening subject you like.
Great. All right. Any last questions that anybody wants to put into the chat? We've got a few more minutes. Are you concerned about invasive seeds?
Yeah, everybody ought to be concerned about the invasives. Yeah, it's you sort of find those by accident, more than by intention, obviously, but yeah, invasive cross-pollination is probably less of a problem than invasives showing up carried by wind or whatever else.
Okay. Someone just asked if you could repeat the last couple of resources. I think it was you said the University of Kentucky.
Yeah, you know, I can make an amendment to the book, but it's publication 128 from the University of Kentucky on home gardening in Kentucky. You just say home gardening manual, University of Kentucky. There it will be.
And then can you just repeat? Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yep. And then the name of the gentleman who wrote the book that you said.
That was Frank Tozer, but there's also Ed
okay.
Smith. And I don't have gardening books right here, but yeah, take a look at your library. Really, I mean, libraries typically have a whole shelf of this material, and you can find one that suits you.
Yeah, and at each of the 4 branches of PCL that have the seed library set up, we also have books on display that will correspond to what's going on in the garden at any given time. So, all right, it looks like that is the last of the questions. So on behalf of Lee and Fatema and myself, thank you so much, Bill. The chats are like how awesome this was, how amazing your presentation was. We do want to remind everybody that on October 27th at 6:30, we'll have Dave Visso from the Kettle Pond Native Garden Project. We'll be talking about saving native seeds and cold stratification.